finally have most of the parts for my AR-10 build, and I wanted to start getting some ammo ready for it. I need to do both a ladder test and a barrel break-in. So I'm going to be doing kind of two different things at the same time. I have 5 rounds loaded up already for a barrel break-in, but I want a few extra. A lot of barrel break-ins can require up to 20 shots. So I have 20 cartridges that have already been deprimed and tumbled in stainless steel. So they've all been trimmed to length, they've all been deburred around the opening. I'm going to use Hornady one-shot to lubricate them. And we're just going to hold them off to the side of the bench over here. Get all 4 sides. Because we don't want any stuck cases. When cases get stuck in the die, it's no fun trying to get them out. I know some people like to say that Hornady one-shot doesn't work. You have to use the oil and roll them in a bag or whatever. I don't care what other people say. I've used Hornady one-shot at over 20,000 rounds. I've never had a stuck case. Keep your dies clean, keep your brass clean, and it won't stick. So according to the load that I want to use is BLC2. I jotted down the information, but I also took a screenshot of it. We're doing 308 Winchester with 168 grain hollow point boat tail. Their specs were for a 2.8 inch case overall length. That means from the base to the tip, 2.8 inches. The reason they choose that number is because that's all that fits in the mag. Using an AR platform, that's kind of what you're restricted to if you want to use a magazine. If you don't want to use a magazine, you can measure your actual chamber. So I have 2 cartridges here. I'll try to line them up the best I can, but you can see that the one on the left is a little bit longer. It's 2.91 inches versus 2.8. This has the bullet engaging in the lands when the bolt carrier runs forward. So there's no bullet jump or anything from the case. As soon as it hits, it's already in the grooves. Some guns like being engaged in the lands, some guns don't. It comes down to barrel harmonics and your load and a million other variables. So I am going to do some like this, I'm going to do some like this, and I do intend to use this rifle to shoot 600 to 1,000 yards, so it will get a lot of testing before we pick a final load. For now, we'll worry more about the barrel break-in. So the first thing I'll do is go through and size all the rounds. Now these dies also come with a punch inside of them to remove the old primer, but since I already have the old primers out, I have removed that punch just so I don't have to worry about it getting stuck in the primer hole, bending or anything. So this is accomplishing 2 different steps at one time. It puts the mouth of the case back into round and to the right internal dimension, and it steps the shoulder down to where it should be. The reason these need to be full length resized is because it's used range brass. They were not fired from my rifle, so they've not been fire formed to my rifle. If they had been shot from my rifle, we could just do a neck sizing and be done with it, and that would help extend the life of the brass. Annealing it would too, but I don't have an annealing set up yet. Now that all the cases have been resized, I will insert primers. And these can be done by hand or they can be done on the press. You want to avoid handling the primer compound with your bare fingers because your oils can cause them not to function properly. Put the case in, push down. I do have a hand priming tool, but for these large primers into, some of this was military surplus. The primer pockets can be a little bit deformed from where they crimp in the primers or use sealing compound on them. And pushing them on the press just makes it a little bit easier. I did try to clean up the primer pockets a little bit already, reamed any of the crimps out of them, and used a swedge to try to get them back into shape, but some of them are still pretty tight. And this press just gives you a little bit more leverage than the hand priming tools do. The hand priming tools are nice for pistol cartridges that use small primers. You can take a whole bunch of them up, sit down in front of the TV, and put primers in while you're enjoying yourself. Alright, so I have all of my primers in. Now we're ready to do powder. And I already took the time to set up my powder drop and my dyes and everything before turning the camera on. But I will double check just to make sure nothing's changed. My starting load is 44 grains. My max load is 47 grains. Now for my barrel break-in, I'm just going to keep it on the lower end. There's no reason to make a high powder load to break in a barrel. So we'll get my pan weighed. We'll dump the first one back in, and we'll measure the second one. Now I have this set up a little bit light, 42.6 grains out of 44. And usually what I do for rifle loads is I'll pour some powder into my trickler here and trickle into the pan. And this makes it a little bit easier than trying to get the powder drop dialed in exactly. So I can set that up here at 42.8. Spin the handle and let it trickle out some powder, and we're at 44.1. That's plenty close enough for some barrel break-in. Put our funnel down and pour. And now that cartridge is ready for a bullet. We'll just repeat that for the rest of them. Alright, now that we have the barrel break-in loads done, we're going to go back through and work on the ladder test. So we need to step up each cartridge just a little bit, and I'm going to start with 44 grains. For the first one, and depending on your level of precision will depend on how much work you need to do with these. So I'm going to do a two-part ladder test, and the idea is that you step up each cartridge by half a grain and shoot them over a chronograph. You don't worry about accuracy or anything at that point. You're just recording the velocity of each powder load. At some point you'll max out. You know, the load chart that you look at for the powder that you're using might not have the same barrel that you're using. It might not have the same case length or case overall length or whatever. And they might be shooting at a different altitude and different temperatures. So there are a ton of variables that can go into what their results are versus what your results are. And you can't rely on a book when you're trying to shoot 1,000 yards. You can't just throw a recipe in for somebody else's gun and expect it to be perfect for yours. So we'll use these to find out where our velocity max out on a 20-inch barrel. The test they did with this powder was a 1 in 12 twist on a 15-inch barrel. I'm using a 20-inch barrel with a 1 to 11 1/4 inch twist. So there could be quite a bit of difference. And if I choose to load these by hand instead of using a magazine, that'll lower my case pressure, which will allow me to put more powder in the case and potentially pick up some extra velocity on the bullet. But we'd have to keep an eye out for signs of overpressure. But once we find out the powder load that my barrel maxes out at, then we can go back and start fine-tuning 1 step below that, or even 2 steps below that, and take it down to either 0.25 grain increments or 0.1 grain increments. Depends on the capabilities of your scale. Mine does 0.1 increments, so that would probably be the finest I'd be able to get down to. And again, each cartridge, you'd just be watching the velocity, and the idea is to find the maximum velocity for your barrel. And once you find that, then you can fine-tune for accuracy by adjusting your bullet setback, or you might have to adjust the powder even further. But there's no point in putting more powder in it than your barrel's capable of burning, so it at least gives you a good stopping point. Alright, we're done with our powder, so we're going to put it away. Doesn't need to be out any longer than we have to have it. We don't want it to draw humidity. We don't want it to sit inside my tube and rust out the metal parts. And we don't want to forget what's in there in case I load anything else. You only want one type of powder out on your bench at a time. You don't want any mix-ups. I have 2 cans. They're both BLC2. One was a little bit low. I knew I wasn't going to have enough in there. So we can put those back. Set that off to the side and get our seating die. You don't need this primer arm anymore. Set it out of the way. So we take our cartridge and put it in. Set the bullet on top. And ride it all the way home. I already have the crimp and everything set on these, so we can throw it back in the tray. And we'll do our break-in loads first. For now, I'm going to load up my ladder test bullets at magazine length. I want to see what the difference is between the magazine length load and the chamber length load. Alright, so I have my barrel break-in loads that we're just going to go ahead and throw straight into the magazine. most manufacturers recommend a specific break-in procedure for their barrel that will usually include shoot 1 shot and clean, shoot 2 shots and clean, shoot 3 shots and clean. Sometimes it can vary between manufacturers, but I have a JP barrel, so I'll be looking up their break-in procedure and following it to the best of my ability. And we may have to load a couple more, but for the video, this is good enough. So now for my ladder test loads, we'll want to mark these. That way I know what they are. And we're going to mark across the back of them. That's number 1. Two. 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now this case should keep the cartridges from falling out and moving around, but if something happens, if it gets dropped and they spill out, at least now they're marked on and I'll know exactly which one is which powder load. And I can check my information when I shoot, write everything down, and then we'll load some of the chamber length cartridges and we'll shoot them and see how much it changes the velocity. And then I'll go from there to work on building up a load for my particular rifle. The area I have to shoot, I think we max out right around 400 yards. So for the time being, I'm going to be building a load for a 400 yard area. If I can find a larger area to shoot in, then I might have to start looking into redoing my load. But for the time being, I need to practice at a range that I can actually shoot at until I get good enough to worry about shooting 600, 700, or even 1,000 yards.